So we're back for another episode. And in today's episode, I'm going to do a deep dive on the dating process. And in particular, the initial online and in-person process. That is because men are getting taken advantage of. And that has to stop. This is going to give you some tangible skills how you can avoid going broke in the process while not missing out in life. Because we don't want to miss out in life. We want the experiences that will enrich our life. And hopefully this can allow you to miss some of the pitfalls, or avoid those pitfalls, and get what you're looking for. Let's get into it. And don't forget, trust the process. So we've heard it all before, the screechings of women in modern society who say they just want gender equality, but they don't. They want the perks of before with none of the downside, and we're going to put an end to that. The free riding is over, that's for sure. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would I trust a guy who's got 50 subscribers, he's got a receding hairline, and he wears crappy grey t-shirts? Well, the style is part of my look, so you remember me. The receding hairline, it's a little late for that. But all I ask is you judge the content based on merit rather than these heuristics that people generally use to judge whether content is valid, is useful. I want you to think, analyze, and give it a chance. So this is what I like to call the pre-vet. This is the online app filtration process that I implement and you can tailor to your liking to implement. Your goals are to control the process, that is steering them in the direction that you want them to take, because if you lose control of the process, it's going to cost you money. And don't forget, the aim of the game here is to spend as least amount of money as possible while you're trying to work out whether they're a suitable candidate. Now, before I get into the red flags, I'm going to reiterate a rule that was told to me by my wise brother. He said, when you're reviewing a dating profile, a dating app profile, you need to judge them by the worst photo that they present, because that's the closest you're going to get to what they really look like. And in my opinion, after being in California for over a year, it's the worst photo and then add 10 kilos or 22 pounds. And that's about what you get. So when you look at the photos, you need to apply that rule so you can set your expectations. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's within your tolerance for that first date. Keep that in mind. Now, some of the big red flags for me are, you've got the designer clothes, designer bags, because that implies expensive taste, and that's a huge liability. If you go down that path, they will expect you to fund those purchases. Expensive tastes in terms of fine dining, that's another red flag for me. I'm not interested in small meals that are expensive by people who think they can cook a lot better than they actually can cook. So that's another red flag. Then there's the drug use. For me, drugs are a no-no. Women are crazy enough. You do not need to add any drugs into the picture. And quite honestly, you shouldn't be taking any drugs either, because you need to present your best self in this world to actually make it. Why do people make their lives more difficult than they need to be? That is a huge mistake that you can avoid, and it also means that you're a better candidate, and that will help you. But you need to have realistic expectations from the get-go, that's for sure. So in terms of your photos, women will envision themselves in your photos. So you need to present a life that's true to yourself, but a life that a woman would want to put herself into. If she can envision that in your photos, then you're going to be more successful on that end. And what you need to do, looking at her photos, is you actually need to look at her photos beyond just her. Look at the background, look at indicators in those photos that will give you a good indication as to who this person is. Also, in terms of like her mindset, her ideology, her political stance, a lot of that they reveal, and that gives a good insight into who this person is. And don't forget, those who claim to be the most tolerant of all are the most intolerant. The diversity is our strength people. They do not want diversity at all. What they want is people who look different but all think the same. So that's a huge red flag. You've got to stay clear for that. And then in terms of the drug use, what I should have mentioned was those who say they use drugs socially, you've also got to avoid those, because that's the type of woman who just conforms to societal expectations. She doesn't actually think for herself. She'll claim that she's an independent thinker, she's a strong modern woman, but in reality, she just does what society tells her to do, and then she thinks she's morally superior to you because she does. So stay clear for those type of people. You need people that have good moral values, that people that you share common beliefs with. You don't need batshit crazy. Avoid batshit crazy, even if she's hot. I know that hot crazy scale, you've probably seen it before. You've got to avoid that. Avoid it at all costs, because if you don't, once the divorce lawyer, if you make it that far, tells you what you're in for, your life's ruined. And we want to avoid those pitfalls, because I'm going to do a future series. There's going to be the lifestyle financial series, and in that series you've got to avoid these major mistakes. That's for sure. So there's some of my red flags. You've probably got your own, and you can tailor that. Just you've got to work out what works for you, because the aim of the game is, if you can avoid the unsuitable candidates up front, you're going to save in those in-person costs as well. That's for sure. Now, when it comes to how much time you should spend online, or how fast you should try to proceed to the in-person portion of the dating process, it's really a personal preference that you'll have to decipher for yourself. So essentially, if we can get the early dates costing you effectively nothing or close to nothing, then it really just becomes a personal preference. And if you feel like you can get to know someone better in person, then it might be worth proceeding in person and not spending too much time online. It really it depends on the individual. And then there'll be cultural considerations that you'll have to take into consideration. Not only your cultural considerations, but the area in which you live. So yeah, it's just something to consider. But when we get those costs down low, it shouldn't be a monetary cost that will determine how to proceed. So, rule number 1, do not pay for anything on a first date. And in order to achieve that, what you need to do is be very selective on the timing of the dates. So, mid to late morning and the afternoon slot. They're the two that you'll target because you want them well away from a breakfast, a brunch, a lunch, or a dinner. The earlier the better, but the afternoon slot can work as long as it's not too late. I mean, it would be good, given that we live in a world where it's just full of strong, independent women, that they'd actually pay their fair share. But unfortunately, we haven't got to that point. And especially here in California, you'll hear them constantly go on about it. And yet the expectation is that a man has to pay for them. That ain't happening around here. That's for sure, if I have any say about it. So, let's get into it. So, the key here is how can you save money in those early dates? It's the in-person phase, the first 2 to 3 dates, keeping those costs as low as possible. Because effectively you're vetting that person. You don't want to waste unnecessary money. And just think about it. Let's just say you go on a date every second weekend for a year. We'll say 25 dates. And if you're spending $15, that's $400. It could be in your pocket instead of just pissing it away. Or if you took them on dinners, and let's just say that it was $80 per meal, that's $2,000. That's $2,000 that you could have in your pocket, that you could be using that money for other means. You could be using that money to make more money, but instead you've burnt it. So what can you do? Well, essentially, you need to control the in-person dating process. You need to take the lead and you need to steer them in the direction that you want them. Now, depending on the locality that you live, what options you have, that could be difficult or it could be easy. Let's just say you live in Sydney. You've got options in Sydney. In Sydney, if you're in a city or close enough, you've got the Botanical Gardens, you've got Centennial Park, you've got Barangaroo. You've got options where you can go to places that aren't actually going to cost you any money, depending on the method of you getting there. If you can walk, you can save even more money. And it's not like it's an unattractive place to go. So the key is to take them, or even like the Bondi to Coogee Walk. So they're the kind of things that even if you couldn't walk from your home locality to that location, if it was a bus ride or keeping those costs, if you do own a vehicle and you can park somewhere where you don't have to pay for parking, then that's an option as well. So it's keeping your options open and not making them feel like you're trying to cheap out. So it's being creative and vetting them so you don't waste your money. Because the key is to not waste your money, to make informed decisions on if you want to proceed further, assuming they want to as well. So there's some tips for you. Take that on board, try and apply that to your situation and see how you go. Don't forget, control the process, steer them in the direction that you want them to go. So when you're making plans for these dates, you take control. You give them options, but you constrain those options. You present options to them to combine and then get agreement with the decision. So you can present them maybe 3 options, 2 options, or if they're the type of person you feel like you can just give them a 1 option they're going to accept, then just go for it. Control the process, steer them in the direction you want to go. So, in summary, the golden rule is never pay for anything on a first date. And in order to do that, you need to control the process by steering them in the direction that you want them to go. Because your money is your money, and the more you can keep of it, the better for you. So, that's a wrap. If you like that video, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and share this video to people who would benefit from this. Until next time, catch you later. When in doubt, ask yourself, what was Aaron doing? You can't go wrong.